Okay, Barb, take it away.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good morning, everybody. I'm Barbara Weinstein, the Associate Director at the Religious Action Center and the Director of the Commission on Social Action. I'm so pleased to have you joining us on this webinar, The Urgency of Now, the Reform Movement Mobilizes to Meet the Challenges Facing Our Nation. I want to start off by sharing with you about how we're going to structure our time together today. This is really going to be the first of a series of webinars that we're going to have in the coming weeks and months. Some are going to focus on sharing information, and some are going to provide key information updates about issues that we care about as a movement, and some are going to focus on training and skill building. Today's webinar is going to have three parts. I'm going to start with an overview of where we are at this moment in time and what we're likely to see on the legislative front in the coming weeks, mostly at the federal level, but a bit at the state level as well. We're then going to highlight what our congregations and you can be doing to take action in your local community and how you can really get started or deepen this work. And finally, we're going to provide an update on the Women's March on Washington that's happening on January 1st here in DC. So let's jump right in, because we're really at a unique moment in which the reform movement has been activated, inspired, mobilized, and we are responding in the moment to everything that is happening, both on the individual level and at the congregational level as well. And today's webinar is really a reflection of that. To give you a snapshot, we had nearly 600 Reformed Jews join us on our post-election webinar in November. Thousands of people have filled out our action alert calling on the president-elect to rescind the appointment of Steve Bannon to a senior White House position. And we have nearly 500 people who are already registered to join us in the end of April, beginning of May for the consultation on conscience here in DC. So if you haven't registered yet, do it soon. It should be a spectacular conference. And it's really clear from all of those examples and lots of others that our movement is ready to go. So let's paint a picture of the new political landscape as best we know it right now. What are things going to look like between today and really the first 100 days of the new Congress, which coincides coincidentally with the consultation? At the federal level, we know that there are core issues at stake. Right now, as a matter of fact, one of the things that we're working on with the Obama administration in the closing weeks of that presidency is the issue of deferred action for childhood arrivals, known as DACA. You may remember there was an executive action taken to protect these young adults, late teenagers who came here undocumented with their parents and have grown up in the United States without legal status through no fault of their own. And they are now at risk after registering under the DACA program that encouraged them to come out of the shadows and contribute freely to the country where they have been educated and grown up and want to contribute. So we're working to encourage the Obama administration right now to do whatever it can in the next few weeks to protect these young people, and especially given the statements that the president-elect made during the campaign, which puts them at heightened risk once the new administration comes in January. Relatedly, around issues of immigration and identity, we may see, per the promises made during the campaign, some effort made to register people or create a registry people, similar to what was known as the National Security Entry-Exit Registration System, or NSEERS. This was something that was created back in 2002, and it required all males 16 years old and up from certain countries, 25 countries, to register with the government. And it was a program that was frankly both offensive. Out of the 25 countries, 24 were predominantly Muslim, and quite frankly ineffective as well. There were actually 0 terror convictions under this program. And so it was basically suspended in 2011. And we are going to be working in the coming weeks and months to make sure that no targeting of people for a registry or otherwise is done based on religion. So those are two of the priorities, but we know that there are other challenges coming down the pike as well. Healthcare has already been named as the first issue that the new Congress is going to tackle when they're sworn in the first week of January. And Affordable Care Act repeal is the top issue on their agenda. More than 20 million previously uninsured Americans were covered under the Affordable Care Act. Kids can now stay on their parents' insurance through age 26. Being a woman, as they say, is no longer a pre-existing condition, and insurers can't deny coverage based on pre-existing conditions. So for all of those reasons and many others, it's imperative that we join together to oppose efforts to repeal the Affordable Care Act, this really landmark law that transformed healthcare in our country. We also expect to see votes to significantly change or block grant the Medicare and Medicaid programs that serve millions of Americans, and block granting is likely to result in diminished coverage. So we're going to be working pretty intensely on that as well with you to make sure that our members of Congress, our state legislators, our governors hear from us about those issues. And we know as well that the work that we've been doing for really decades, but so much more deeply in the recent years around racial justice, around voting rights, around criminal justice reform, are more important now than ever. The Voting Rights Act that was so badly damaged by the 2013 Supreme Court decision in Shelby v. Holder is still deeply weakened. And people we saw in the most recent election having difficulty registering to vote, being hindered in their access to the polls on election day. And so continuing in that work is going to be essential. Similarly, around issues of sentencing reform and addressing the inherent racial biases that exist in our criminal justice system. The last issue I'll spotlight really is reproductive rights, where we already know that there are going to be efforts to cut funding to essential services and targeting Planned Parenthood as well. So we know that's going to require our vigilance, our voices, and our action. Aside from the actual policies, we know that the role that new nominees, whether to the cabinet or to the Supreme Court to fill the seat that was vacated by the death of Justice Scalia, those individuals are going to have an enormous impact on shaping the policy decisions that go forward for the next period of time, certainly the next 4 years with the administration and with the Supreme Court appointment for a generation or more. And so making sure that the people that fill those positions are held accountable for their views, the views of the administration, is essential. And I hope you'll join us by helping senators think about these issues and plan for the questions that they're going to ask during the confirmation process by checking out our resource at askthenominees.com, where you can actually submit questions to be suggested to senators for those confirmation hearings. Whether it's on the environment, and whoever sits at the Interior Department or the Energy Department is going to have a huge role shaping those issues, or issues around the separation of church and state, where whoever becomes the next Secretary of Education is going to have an impact on deciding whether federal dollars can be used to spend on vouchers that then fund parochial school education. All of these individuals have a tremendous impact on the issues that we care about so deeply. And so it's an opportunity for all of us to lift our voices together on them. All of these issues and so many others also have state implications, of course, and governors and state legislators have a huge role to play in determining things like whether and how the Affordable Care Act exists or is changed, whether or how Medicare and Medicaid continue to exist as a vital safety net program for Americans. Voting rights, criminal justice reform that I mentioned, all of those decisions are essential to involve and build relationships with your state legislators and governors with, because their voices are going to be heard just as our voices need to be heard in Washington as these decisions are being made. And so for those reasons, we're really expanding and shifting the focus of our work to engage more deeply and powerfully at the state and local level. That adage that all politics is local has never been more true than it is right now. And so that's some of the scope of the challenges before us. You see on your screen some of the key dates when Congress will be returning and these votes will be happening, some of the really hot issues we expect to see coming down the pike in the first period of time. And it's going to be essential that we do this work in partnership, not just with other Reformed Jews, but beyond the walls of our congregations. And so for that reason, among many, I'm thrilled that we have joining us on this webinar this morning, Megan Black, who is the National Clergy Organizer for PICO National Network. I'm sure you've heard of PICO. It is one of our most treasured partners. They are a multi-faith, multiracial network of community organizations who bring grassroots faith leaders together to address issues like ending the criminalization of people of color, protecting and advancing immigrant rights, ensuring workers a living wage. And Megan works with clergy leaders to deepen and to strengthen their work. She's been a tremendous partner for us at the Religious Action Center, and we're thrilled to have her joining us to share what PICO is doing as a model for how to be effective at the local level. So Megan, the call is yours.
Thanks, Barbara. It's morning where I am, so good morning to everyone. I am glad to have a chance to speak with you about my work and my organization, PICO's work. PICO and the Reformed Jewish Movement have become good friends to both of our benefit, so it's always good to share space with you. So as Barbara mentioned, PICO is a multiracial, multi-faith community of faith leaders, clergy, congregations, and organizers who are really deeply rooted in their communities. And these communities are spread across the country. They're connected to each other by our national network, which I work for. So we have the benefit of a base that is really deeply entrenched in a diverse range of cities, towns, and communities, doing very, very local work, moving very, very local issue cuts across the country. And then we have a national level policy and training arm that helps shape and amplify the local work. So certainly the events of the last few weeks have really thrown us for a bit of a loop. I checked in with some folks at the Religious Action Center the other day, and I can report that a lot of the conversations that you are having, we've also been having in our community. And so PICO, while we tend to be moving at breakneck speed on our issues, and our issues range from criminal justice reform, immigration reform, minimum wage, access to healthcare, et cetera, we've been really intentional in the last few weeks about taking time to have really deep conversation amongst ourselves as organizers and as a staff team, and then fostering those same conversations with our congregations and our clergy leaders. We're trying to think about what it means for us to step into this new world, how we meet the challenge of it, and what we can and should be doing. So it's a big question. Our leaders, our clergy leaders are asking, our faith leaders are asking, what are we supposed to be doing right now? And I don't have a 100% solid answer for you. I don't know the answer to that. But I can tell you about how we're going about that conversation, and more than a conversation, how we're going about responding to that question concretely, with knowing what we know, and kind of all the big questions that remain ahead of us. So before I kind of get into a little bit what we're doing, I'll note I saw in Rabbi Jonah's piece on the urgency of now this call to reach across differences and forge relationships with other communities. And I can't stress enough from our perspective as a multi-faith, multiracial community how critical this is. And I think perhaps this is the thing that has stuck with me the most since November 8th is the revelation, and this is not new to any of us, but the revelation of just how deeply divided we are as a nation and as a people and as communities of faith. So there's lots of ways into that data point, but I think what we've realized over the last few weeks is that it doesn't change, none of these change the reality of the immediate reality of this. So as I said, this is as true of our faith communities as it is of the rest of the country. I just came back from a 2-week trip to India, completely unrelated to work. It was so glorious, it was wonderful. But one of the things that was astounding to me while I was there, it was my first time there, was how people from different traditions and backgrounds, classes, cultures, etc., they live almost literally on top of each other. And they do so while expressing the fullness of their religious and cultural commitments via language and dress and ornamentation and food, etc. It's astounding, it's amazing. And I'm not trying to reduce India's religious pluralism to a postcard or ignore that religious violence in parts of India is a very horrifying reality. But it nevertheless remains that what I saw in Mumbai and in Bangalore was really far removed from what I see in Nashville, Tennessee, where I live, in Kansas City, where I used to live, and all across this country as I travel for my job. So PICO and myself by extension is trying to confront the gulfs that exist between us head on. And as I said, we don't have this 100% figured out yet. So we're trying a lot of things. Our federations, which is what we call our local chapters, are investing really heavily in clergy caucuses, clergy formation, and building out interfaith and multi-faith clergy communities. We really want to invest over the next 18 months to 2 years to 4 years, informing our clergy leaders in a praxis model for their work that expands their understanding of this work to include encounter with people and traditions and communities who are different from them, a disruption of their assumptions and preconceptions and faulty or divisive belief systems, a reimagining of what it might mean to be people and communities of faith, and perhaps even a nation, and action, prophetic action, to change the narrative in this country that has divided us. And we call this a theology of resistance. You might have heard myself or Michael Ray Matthews, our director of clergy organizing, talk about this. We are committed over the next several years to throwing down on fostering these conversations and inviting clergy leaders and inviting faith leaders into experiences of encounter, disruption, reimagining, and action, and ideally prophetic action as people of faith. So related to this, we're also forming our organizers to keep up with our clergy, because our clergy are asking really hard questions right now, because they're realizing that this is a moment that requires perhaps more of us than has been asked in quite some time. And so we want to be sure that our organizers and our other community leaders are able to go lockstep with our clergy leaders as they forge a path forward in this. So we're also, alongside this, inviting our congregations, which come from a variety of traditions and backgrounds, to step into really deep listening, to step into really deep prayer, and to step into really deep reflection about what it means for them to be a community of faith. So to access really what this means. And the key word, I think, we're really having to examine what it means to be, what faith actually means, all the risk and all the boldness that word contains. So right now, and I'm sure you guys have been having conversations about this as well, right now that conversation is taking the shape of the sanctuary movement. We're talking with our congregations and with other faith partners about what it means to take risks on behalf of the stranger, to practice radical hospitality, to fling our doors wide open, even as our communities are slamming them shut all across this country. So this conversation is happening both really concretely, like we're planning out, we're meeting with people and planning out the logistics and the legal and financial aspects of protecting, for example, our immigrant neighbors who are facing deportation. And then we're also having this conversation a little more abstractly, a little more philosophically. This is part of our bigger framework of leaning into this moment. We're trying to conceive of what it means to extend protection, to extend sanctuary, safe haven, both physically and symbolically, to our Muslim neighbors and all others who are at risk of extreme persecution right now. So the kind of immediate answer to what congregations are doing right now is twofold. One, it's thinking really, really deeply and having really honest conversations about who they are and what it means for them to, like, what the resources of their faith are, and then finding ways to act on that, to move that forward, because what we find is that conversation often happens most effectively in the midst of action. And so this is where the sanctuary piece comes in. So this all kind of boils down to a somewhat desperate and very necessary attempt to be really authentically people of faith who see a bigger and better and more loving way forward. So I've talked a lot of really floofy stuff for the past 8 minutes or so. So I'm going to finish with some of the really concrete internal measures that we're doing, that's guiding PICO's work with congregations moving forward, and that I'm really excited to hopefully partner with our Reformed Jewish congregations on. So one, we're shifting our focus. Although we always are working on issue cuts, we're always advancing advancing the same issues that Barbara was talking about, contacting our legislators, throwing actions. We're always working on that. We're also building capacity to bring people into our work. So whether that's through a house meeting, whether that's through one-to-ones, we are including in our plan for the next 2 years, whatever it's going to take to bring more and more people into the work of organizing, into the work of social action, into the work of justice making. I'm really throwing the doors open on who we want to be a part of that, who we can invite, and what it means for that to be a transformative journey for all of us. As I said, we're really committed to providing sanctuary for whoever may need it, and to having that be a radical expression of our faith, and in some ways a spiritual discipline, a spiritual practice for us to engage in, one that benefits us. We engage sanctuary as full partners, not as hosts who are doing a service, but as people who understand that in order for us to be fully people of faith, we need this as much as those who are seeking sanctuary need it. We're also committed to meeting with our local officials in all the places in which we're located, and we have federations in I think 22 states across the country. So our federations are moving forward on hosting or planning and having as many meetings with local officials as they can to advance the interests of our people. And then the kind of most immediate short-term thing that we're doing is pressuring President Obama for a presidential pardon for undocumented brothers and sisters, and for providing clemency to people with low-level nonviolent drug offenses. So we had something, I forget how many, but a bunch of folks marched into the White House yesterday to deliver, I think, 30,000 petitions asking the president to pardon these folks. So we're putting the pressure on that immediately, and having these really deep conversations about what congregations have to offer to this moment. And so I'm really happy to be having this conversation with you all. I hope that we can continue it. I'm excited for the analysis that you have and for the really clear work that you're doing, for the hundreds of people that showed up for this call, and really pumped to see what this partnership will yield going forward, because I read an article recently about how this moment has created this resurgence on the religious left, or at least in these kind of progressive religious communities around. There's work to be done, and bridges to be built and crossed. So thank you so much for hosting me, for inviting me to have this conversation with you. I'm happy to follow up with anyone as needed.
Great, thank you, Megan Black. Really appreciate your being with us today. And for those that were with us together in North Carolina over the summer, you got a preview of Megan's greatness. She was our partner on the ground doing election protection work and voter registration. And as much as the earthquake of this election has throttled all of us, we should not forget to celebrate the victories we had. Tens of thousands of votes were counted that wouldn't have counted. I think Pico's work alone got into the hundreds of thousands of votes. And so if we take the long view, in 2 years, 4 years, 8 years, it'll become important for tens of thousands more votes to be protected and to be counted. So it's a good segue. One piece of work that congregations should continue to do over the next 2 to 4 years is the voter registration, voter engagement conversations that will yield great fruit when we get more people to the polls, however they vote in 2 years and 4 years. Thank you again, Megan, and we are very grateful to Pico. Now that you've heard some of what we're up against and an indicator of some of the ways that we're asking people to take action, I want to flesh this out a little bit more and think about the urgency of now for individuals and for congregations. First of all, I see in the chat box, and this is what's great about a webinar, we're getting real-time feedback. A number of you have asked about the realism of presidential pardons. One of the things that we try and do in our role, as Megan described as prophets of the resistance, is we try and have an opening view or a bargaining position of strength, a prophetic vision of the world as it should be. So the world should be a world in which all of these young people get pardons. It may be that the ultimate reaction we get from the White House is somewhere in between, doing nothing and doing what we want them to do. So I was in a meeting at the White House yesterday with officials who work on immigration, doing inside pressure. There's a lot of pressure on the White House to do everything that it can do. Some of the things that it can do have to happen very quietly. and behind the scenes, and some of the things will be more public. So I go on the Urgency of Now website at rac.org and look at the DACA background materials and add your voice to the president and be part of this movement. You can see on the website also, if you go to Urgency of Now, lots of work to be done around the nominees. The Steve Bannon Action Alert, still live, still important to keep awareness and pressure about Steve Bannon. 200,000 people have engaged with us around Steve Bannon. So it is a very important way to stay engaged with our base and have the hundreds of thousands of Reformed Jewish voices be heard in this current political climate. Also, there's lots of resources, like you can see the Speak Truth to Power guide, the guide for congregations to be able to have these very hard conversations, to make sure that, though there may be an overwhelming surge of desire to act for these things, that there are maybe a minority set of voices who disagree and dissent, and those voices should be heard respectfully and lovingly. But you should also be able to take action. So the guide helps you guide your congregation through that. Most important now, though, is to affirm, as PICO is an organization of congregations, so too our Union for Reformed Judaism is a movement of congregations. So though there's lots of opportunities for individuals to act, to sign up for action alerts, to get all of your friends on your social networks, post on Facebook, and email them to get them to sign up for our action alerts so that individuals can engage, we need you to engage as congregations. And in order to kind of build our base of power for the long run, it's important that we do this deeply within the synagogue, but that we also reach across lines of race, class, and faith, as we've done with our partners in the various PICO organizations and in the industrial areas foundations, to build a base of power that transcends race, that transcends neighborhood, that transcends ethnicity, and that transcends socioeconomic background. So we want to double down on our commitment to being a deep relationship so that we can stand up against the hate and the bigotry on a very local level in ways like city ordinances and coming together against bigotry, or on a state and federal level as well. So as an example of what this looks like, we want to bring in our friend and colleague, Rabbi Andy Vogel, my former neighbor in Brookline, Massachusetts. Andy is going to paint a picture of a story that just happened last week in the greater Boston area, but is not unique to Boston. We see stories like this happening in Phoenix, Arizona, Chicago, Illinois, Dallas, Texas. So, but for a taste of what this kind of work looks like, Andy?
Great, thank you. I'm so happy to join this webinar and great to be a part of this. I want to just paint the scene for those of you who didn't attend of what happened this past Sunday night here in Boston. We had an extraordinary evening of interfaith activism and people coming together. And it's possible to do this in many other communities, or to do something similar. We had 2,600 people of all faiths gathered at the mosque, the major mosque that we have in Boston, the Islamic Society of Boston's Cultural Center. 2,600 people filled the room, Jews, Christians, Muslims, Hindus and Buddhists, and people of no faith. And it was really an extraordinary evening. On the dais were clergy leaders of all different kinds, rabbis, priests, ministers, people from the Unitarian Church, from the Presbyterian, from AME, just a whole variety of different leaders. And then, as you can see on your screen, we were also very happy to have with us Senator Elizabeth Warren, who I happened to, at one point, got a chance to stand in front of, and that resulted in this photo. You can't really see in this photo, but there were dozens of clergy members there, maybe 70 or 80 members of the clergy there. Standing next to her is Mayor of Boston, Marty Walsh, and then standing on the other side of her is the imam of the mosque in Boston. And so what emerged is that when the officials learned that we were putting together this event, they felt, because so much power is being generated, that they wanted to be there. And that's ultimately the model, is building power through relationships so that elected officials and people of power really feel that they have to be part of the whole story. This past Sunday night, with 2,600 people of all faiths present at the mosque, I just want to tell you a little bit of what's happened. We had a number of speakers. People, really the goal of the evening was to affirm the values of dignity for all dignity for people of all different faiths, for immigrants, for Muslim, for women, for all of the people who have been the victims of hate over this past election cycle, which has been such a difficult period of time, and to also affirm that we're going to work together. And I think that really the theme is that we're acting across lines of difference. We're coming together. We heard testimonials, personal testimonials from a woman who's a Latino immigrant who's deeply afraid of what may happen to her. We heard from a Muslim woman who came to the United States and has built an extraordinary life and become very, very successful in her work, and is also fearful of discrimination against Muslims. And we heard from an African-American man who's similarly fearful. We also wanted to acknowledge that that there are divergent voices, and one of the people who was called to the dais to speak was a man who said he voted for Trump. He's a Trump supporter, and yet he's also a member of a church, and talked about how his experience seeing the pain of the people in his congregation in the days after the after the election, coming together with them, and just I think that what really emerged from that is a sense of that when you're in a relationship with people, then you develop a sense of empathy and understanding for them. And relationship is, of course, the cornerstone of this kind of community organizing work. So it was really important to affirm these things. The Greater Boston Interfaith Organization, GBIO, has become a very important power organization in Boston local politics and in state politics. It's very exciting. Of course, Rabbi Jonah Pesner, who's now running the Religious Action Center, is a big part of that story, which is great. But it also includes over 60 houses of worship of all faiths. And we really came to this point where we could have 2,600 people in the room through working very hard over many years to create relationships and to bring people together so that we understand, so that the relationships are at a point that when there's an urgent situation, we can all pick up the phone. We know each other, we trust each other, we have the backing of our leaders in our different houses of worship, and we've built a reservoir of trust, which allows us to pull together in just 3 weeks' time a huge gathering of 2,600 leaders. Of course, it happens with a whole bunch of smaller steps. And so if your congregation isn't part of something like this, don't get overwhelmed. You can be involved in putting together the small steps now in your community to make things happen, to build relationships. What we did in our congregation is we started about 6 years ago with a vision that we just wanted to bring people together. We set a goal of having 100 house meetings, 100 people present, not 100 house meetings, 100 people participating in house meetings with a whole bunch of one-on-one meetings so that people would get to know each other within our community. Again, Rabbi Jonah Pesner was my teacher in figuring out, what the value of this was. It was really extraordinary, so I want to thank Jonah. And what we did is we built relationships and began to understand what matters to people in our community. And then from that, we began to be part of the GBIO and build relationships with people from other faiths. And, as a rabbi, I don't get to interact with the Haitian American community that often, or even people who are just in another part of town a couple miles away whose lives are very, very different. This got us to, again, it's building relationship and understanding what matters to us. So over time, a whole bunch of small steps contributed to this deep reservoir of trust. For example, we decided that we wanted to be involved in preventing gun violence. So within our own community, not part of a massive not part of a massive campaign, but just in our own community, we happen to have our state representative who represents our town is a member of the synagogue. So we brought him into an auditorium. We had 60 people present, members of Temple Sinai, and we told some stories about how gun violence has affected the lives of members of our congregation, and he heard that. We invited candidates to come before he was elected to Congress. Representative Joe Kennedy came to Temple Sinai and heard from us. We also had his opponent come and hear from us. We decided we wanted to be involved in anti-poverty work, in hunger work, and in advocating for that. And so a whole bunch of small steps. We created a strategy team that then spun out to figure out what are the issues that matter to our community, that really affect the daily lives of our community. And we created a number of different issues teams that would then work on those things. And then we also did if I could say we hired an assistant rabbi who in her portfolio would be working specifically on social justice work. And that's been very, very exciting as well. So we created our own group, Tzedek at Sinai. That's our own internal strategy team and all of the efforts, the umbrella organization within our congregation. And we connect with GBIO, the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization. And now we're working on criminal justice reform. We're working on climate change issues. We're exploring refugee assistance work as well. And we're going to be advocating for these types of things. And so it's all part of a much larger effort that's built on relationship building within our community and and outside of our community, leveraging our community's strength, that as a congregation, we're stronger when we work together, and then acting across lines of difference with other folks as well. It's been very exciting.
Great, Andy, thank you so much, and thank you for the shout outs. I really appreciate it. The questions are flooding into the chat box, and we're trying to answer them as we go, and so we'll continue to do that. I want to be crystal clear in echoing what Andy said about the amazing work at GBIO and in Massachusetts this last week was really because of years of base building by the GBIO team, by Temple Israel, by so many other synagogues, but that is not unique to Boston. So I'm going to tell a 2-minute story about Cleveland, but everybody on this call has the potential to be involved in a local group. Somebody posted about New Orleans. There, in fact, is an affiliate of the Industrial Areas Foundation in New Orleans. It is related to a sister organization to GBIO. And offline, you can be in touch with either me or Joy Friedman, who's our director of organizing. We would be happy to oh, Josh Caruso is on the webinar. Josh, are you able to unmute yourself and speak? Because I'm going to tell your story. You probably can't. So I just noticed that Josh Caruso, great rabbi. People should know that at a very historic moment, as riots were about to break out in Cleveland because of a verdict in the case, I think it was Tamir Rice, the front page of the New York Times showed a picture not of riots, but of a unity march of Rabbi Josh Caruso in his talit and in his kippah with African-American ministers and white clergy and Christians and Muslims all marching together in unity to heal Cleveland. But it wasn't just that they were able to restitch the fabric of the community. They were also to put enough pressure to get a consent decree so that law enforcement going forward would operate differently in Cleveland. And they would start to change the racist realities of so much that happens in the criminal justice system and the shooting of civilians, mostly of color, by law enforcement. So the Greater Cleveland Congregation's effort that Fairmont Temple in Cleveland is part of is another one of these broad-based organizations. And the reason we lift up those stories is to say they accomplish two important things for you. One is you're able to build a network of relationships so that when crises happen, you can stand together against hate. You can work together to protect the Muslim community when they're under siege and prevent hate crimes. You can work together as sanctuary congregations and help protect those who are undocumented and maybe facing deportation. And in a place like Ohio, it also gives you more political leverage to engage with the federal legislators who might actually have an impact. Our teacher and scholar, Stephen Windmuller, who is posting in the chat box, referenced the importance in the federal strategy of being able to have leverage points with those, particularly Republicans in the Senate, who may play critical votes to prevent some of the worst excesses that we may be facing. And many of our congregations in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, in Florida, in Arizona are well situated to be in relationship. So part of why you do this work is to have a local impact, both on the relationship building and to have a local impact on legislation to protect your schools, to protect your law enforcement, to be more just, to fight for local ordinances, but also to be able to, in key places, have more of a federal influence. With that, I want to pivot away from the local broad-based organizing and talk about a couple of other issues. Not everybody is situated in a community where there is a broad-based organization like GBIO or Greater Cleveland Congregations or the hundreds of others, but everywhere that you are located, there is some partner across lines of race, class, and faith to work with. A mosque in the community, an NAACP chapter, an African-American church. This is the time to double down on those relationships and do more than just do interfaith dialogue and pulpit sharing, but to have hard conversations about the political landscape around you and to find areas to work together, even on a very local level, to stand up against the kind of injustices that we're seeing. Let me say a couple of other things before I pivot to Joy, who's going to talk about next steps. Michelle Perlman is on. She's a rabbi, and she posted the question about how to have hard conversations in the congregation, particularly, and to take action, even around issues like bigotry and hate that are becoming polarizing, and as some people are politicizing and making partisan. We think it's very important that we speak loudly and clearly on our prophetic values and that we act with power politically, but we understand it's important to honor dissenting voices. It's important to acknowledge that there are different political persuasions in our communities and our congregations, and that this work for us is nonpartisan. And we are actually co-sponsoring a webinar on January 29th that's going to be offered by the Pardes Institute on having the hard conversations, particularly as we learn from the destruction of the temple and the rabbinic discourse that went so foul that it led to destruction. How do we have sacred conversations and allow for dissent in such a way that we can build community and move forward together? Rabbi Esther Letterman, who runs Communities of Practice here at the URJ, will be convening that. So be on the lookout for that webinar on January 26th, January 26th from 2:30 to 3:30. It's called Lessons from Respectful Conversations in Challenging Times. And if you check the URJ website, you will get more information, and it's a really useful way for you to guide your congregation through these hard conversations. I also want to make sure that people get an update on the march, the Million Woman March, because there's been a lot of kind of confusion and a lot of discussion. Just to give people the backstory, it really was this incredible organic phenomenon. 3 women posted on Facebook in their outrage, we should march on Washington on the day after the inauguration, and then hundreds of thousands of people, women and men, liked it and wanted to know what to do next. But it started to fall apart because they didn't have permits. These were not organizers. 3 very seasoned organizers stepped up and took over the march, both to get permits, but to also make sure that the march would actually be led by a more diverse body politic, women of color, women of diverse faiths, and they've spent the last week or two now kind of moving out into the communities. We had actually last night a call with one of the organizers, and we are feeling even more confident about the logistics and the permitting and the security for the march. We were also told, and this is what we were told by one organizer, so take it for what it's worth, but that it was very important to the march organizers that in addition to lifting up the issues of injustice around misogyny and reproductive rights and Islamophobia and racism, that anti-Semitism was very much part of what their mission and concerns were, and that in the publicity that was going to start to get pushed out in the next week or two, it would be a call to end Islamophobia and combat anti-Semitism. And the organizer said they felt it was very important for Jewish women to very much see themselves as part of this movement, in addition to Jewish men and all people. Final thing is, we've been told that there will be a very prominent woman rabbi who will have a major speaking role. So indications are fairly good that the march is both something that logistically makes sense and something that many of us would be proud of. We've heard that many thousands of our folks have gotten commitments to get on buses and start coming. We're working with Washington Hebrew Congregation and some of the other synagogues to host some kind of prayer service in the morning. We're also figuring out ways to create an open space, either at the rack or another venue, for people to come and warm up and have a hot coffee and potentially use our restrooms. So more information, we'll keep posting to the rabbis on the Facebook page to give them regular updates, and then to the wider lay leadership sometime in the next week or two, we'll post something wider than that. With that, I'm going to turn it to my wonderful colleague, Joy Friedman, our Director of Organizing, for concrete next steps.
Thank you, Rabbi Pesner. Thank you, Jonah. I'm going to ask us to return to the Urgency of Now Resource Center, and I'll talk specifically about some next steps. And I want to frame what I'm going to say by reminding us all and centering us all in a truth that I learned in a song at summer camp: mitzvah goreret mitzvah. When we do good, it begets more good. When we act, it begets more action. So many of us, myself included, are overwhelmed by the number of issues. As Rabbi Stephen Windmuller wrote to the panelists earlier in this conversation, there's so much at stake, and so much that with each nomination and appointment seems to be in jeopardy around my values and the Reform Jewish values and our policies. And in order to see our values voiced and enacted, we have real work to do. And while we want to take the most strategic and effective collective action possible, we also need to act now. So I want to share a bunch of opportunities for us to act, with a request and a commitment that these actions need to beget the next action. That one and done is never the answer, and certainly not right now, but that one for the next one, for the next one, and doing one yourself and the next one with others and the next one with more others is the process we see happening here, and what we need to do to make our values manifest in the world around us. So I want to talk about what we are doing as a movement, what you can do as an individual, and what we're asking congregations to do collectively. As a movement, we have action opportunities around DACA, the deferral of childhood arrivals in our country, and around the Affordable Care Act. DACA, protecting those immigrant children who came out of the shadows and registered under an executive order that was passed during Obama's administration, is something that we need to take action on, that Obama can take action on right now. So we have an action alert on our website. You can see it right there. It's in the center of the Urgency of Now resource. Opportunities to act, to push, urge the president to take action to protect these individuals immediately. That is an urgent, timely request. The next urgent, timely moment to stand for our values is going to be around the Affordable Care Act. And as soon as January 5th, there will be hearings and decisions and votes in the Senate that will move forward a budget that will either include the Affordable Care Act or will call for its repeal or its replacement. And as early as January 23rd, there'll be another definitive vote around the same issue, around Affordable Care Act. So for DACA, please use our action alert and reach out to the president. For Affordable Care Act, do the same, use our alert, reach out to your senators. Our action alert will allow you to email any congressperson that represents you, and also encourages you to call the senators. The senators are the front line of the conversation on the Affordable Care Act. We need those phone calls. And when you make those calls, immediately encourage the people you're in relationship with, people who are going to be affected by the potential decimation of the Affordable Care Act, to make their calls as well. We know that there are as many as 30 million people who may lose their health care coverage if the Affordable Care Act is repealed and not replaced appropriately. So we have an urgent need to respond to that. And you can do that immediately as an individual and in your communities by spreading the word on this as well as soon as possible. We are going to have, as Barbara mentioned at the beginning of this call, we're going to have webinars for the next several months leading up to our consultation on conscience. So I both want to encourage you to register for and attend our consultation on conscience, where hundreds of Reformed Jews have already signed up to join together to learn about how to most effectively stand for what we collectively believe in and have passed policy around as a Reform movement, and to do that action, to stand for it while we're all together in our nation's capital. It will be the 101st day of the new administration on the Monday where we gather. We'll begin on Sunday, and on Monday, we need to make our voices heard. And if you are with us, you will amplify the message and you will return home with more tools about how to stand for what we believe in. And between now and then, please join us for the webinars. We will talk about the most urgent things that are happening, and we will share stories like we did today and tools about how to build relationships across lines of difference, build a stronger core team in your congregation to stand as a congregation, and continue to share tools like the one that Rabbi Esther Letterman will be sharing at the end of January about how to have conversations across political division. Because right now, we need to be ending divisions and finding strength and unity, especially in our communities and across lines of difference with people who share our values. If you can come to consultation, try to come as a community. The more that we act as congregations, the more effective our action is going to be. We are a movement of people who identify themselves as Reformed Jews. There are over 2 million people in that category. And we are a movement of 900 congregations. When we can get a fraction of over 1 million people and over 100 congregations to act as a collective, our voice will not be ignorable. And when we partner across lines of difference and share the same message with people of different races and economic backgrounds and religions from us, our voices will not be denied. They will be heard, and we'll be able to stand for what we believe in that much more effectively. So I encourage you to look at our resource, to share this webinar with other folks, to join us in the future, to find the local broad-based organizing group in your community, to go to your clergy, or if you're a clergy person, to identify leaders and bring them together to figure out how you'll take first steps or deepening steps into standing for what we believe in, into protecting immigrants who came out from the shadows under the current administration, to protecting the Affordable Care Act, and so many individuals, especially poor and elderly folks who are in jeopardy of losing their health insurance, to start emailing congresspeople and calling your senators right away, and come to consultation, come to our upcoming webinars, arm yourselves with every piece of information you can, and start acting, and know that each action can beget the next even more powerful, even more effective action. And together we will stand for what we believe, and we will protect our country and all of those who feel threatened in this moment. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being the Reform movement, a movement that stands together, that cares for so many of the same things, that is both light unto the nations and finds light within each of us, that it brightens our communities and our world. Thank you.